everybody, my name is Elaine, and now that the 7th ring is out on Unison League for the starter classes, I want to take some time to give my first impressions of the new abilities that have come out with these rings. So let's go into my rings and see what's in store. So as you know, Donna is an archmage, or a mage, now an archmage. And I'm just going to talk about these abilities first because I can. So first up is something called Weakened, which has a cooldown of 4 seconds and a cost of 9, so doing good so far. Mage exclusive, you don't say. Targets one enemy with an ability power of 150. Okay, well that's a bit of a typo because they're conjoined, but whatever. Deals magic damage 3 times with a success value of 100. Decreases all stats by 20% for 15 seconds. So the wording here is a little confusing because, you're hoping that you're decreasing the stats of your enemies by 20% for 15 seconds. And I think that's the case just because it doesn't say this is a demerit, but it would be good if that was a little clearer. This isn't, a bad ability. The cost is low. For the cost and the cooldown, the damage you would do is high, but the only issue you might run into is because this doesn't run into, or rather bypass invulnerability and, nulls and all that lovely stuff that we use to troll each other in this game. That damage dealt might be decreased quite a fair amount, but it does do damage 3 times, and it does supposedly have a success value of 100, so you're always going to hit. So that's not bad, and because you're decreasing your enemy's stats, maybe you do a little more damage than you might normally, and because this, again, is very low cost, this is something you can churn out, especially with that very low cooldown over and over. Next up, we have Mage Weapon Level 2, so this increases the mad attack of staves by 20%. I love how they're not even including the charms anymore. They're like, yeah, we know, we never made those, so, we're not going to mention them anymore, but we all remember you used to, guys. We all remember. So the nice thing about this is just flat out increasing your ability to do damage, and I like that because this is a DPS class. Now we have something called Transmagic Wall. Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy. This has a cooldown of 40 seconds and no cost. Again, mage exclusive. Damages 30% of your max HP. Demerit recovers your cost by 25%. Target yourself and your adjacent allies max 3 targets in total. Applies effect that reflects 50% of physical and magic damage taken for 5 seconds. Cannot be used when you have less than 30% of your max HP remaining. So this is another Ether Exchange option. It's a little stronger in the sense that it recovers more cost than Ether Exchange at its base. But it's not as great as Fanatic Soul, in my opinion, just because Fanatic Soul affects everybody in your party, and this only affects 3 targets in total. And then it has that thing that applies the reflection for 5 seconds, which is, that's nothing. And on top of that, there are so many abilities that bypass reflect, and so many pieces of armor that, other players could be using, or, defensive gear, because not everyone uses armor, but defensive gear that can, bypass the reflection or reduce the damage from reflection. This just isn't as helpful. I would just use Fanatic Soul if you're a mage, and if you're not, Ether Exchange if you need something to help you recover cost. This is another option if you need, a cost scanning ability, but probably not the best thing you have in your arsenal. Next up, we have Mage Guard Level 2, which increases the M defense of hats by 20%. That's good. Defense is nice, but I like to do the damage, and this is not helping me do that. Now we have Star Blast. Oh, Jesus. Okay, this has a cooldown of 10 seconds and a cost of 30. And it's usable when a relic-type weapon is equipped in the main slot and targets one enemy at random. Its ability power is 150. It deals magic damage 10 times with a success value of 80. Damages 25% of your max HP. And target changes with each attack cannot be used when you have less than 25% of your max HP remaining. So, few things. This cost is obscene. I think that's the highest cost ability I've ever seen, which makes it, not as viable as some other options. Has a, pretty good ability power. It's dealing magic damage in your mage, so that's good. But it has a 20% chance of missing, but then again, it hits 10 times. So kind of like average again, not breaking through invulnerability or any like reflect or any of that stuff. So your damage output might be decreased by the fact that that isn't part of the deal as well. And it also damages your HP. And mages can be a bit of a glass cannon, kind of like the archer. So this is probably not your best bet. You also have to use a relic, which, I mean, I've already kind of seen what happens with this ring. It's probably not going to be something you're going to be using as a mage. You're going to be using staves or staffs if you prefer. And I don't see why you would use this. Like, the cost and everything else I just mentioned just makes it unusable as far as I'm concerned. Now we have Miserable Disaster. Okay, this is kind of the opposite. The cooldown has 40 seconds, which is very, very high, and the cost is 20, also pretty high, but again, not as high as I've seen some other abilities. This is usable when a staff-type weapon is equipped in the main slot, targets one enemy and their adjacent enemies of max of 3, with an ability power of 80. It deals magic damage 2 to 5 times. It penetrates damage reduction, damage reflection effects with a success value of 70. Reduces status ailment resistance by 30 for 15 seconds. That's obviously a typo. Excludes cooldown reduction and dual attack. So first off the bat, the cost and the cooldown for this are just too high. It's, obviously meant to replace Meteor Rain, something along those lines. Other concerns are, the ability power is pretty low. Yeah, it hits 2 to 5 times and it could penetrate damage reduction and reflection, but it won't necessarily. It only has a success value of 70, and the game tends to troll people, so I just don't feel like this is really a viable option either. Not a fan. Next up is Fortuna's Blessing. Increases star elemental attack by 3 for mage class. Alright. Okay. Alright, I guess I'll take it, but it's there. Time Spellbook. Okay, cooldown of 8 seconds. That's pretty good. Cost 18. That's a little high. Usable when a book-type weapon is equipped in the main slot. Okay, first demerit there. Target one enemy and their adjacent enemy is a max of 3 enemies. Ability power 160. That's pretty good. Deals magic damage 3 times using both Mad Attack and Magical Defense with a success value of 100. Activates Time Slice, which reduces the time adaptation effects, buffs, special buffs, and non-removal buffs. Applied to the target by 10 seconds. Healing ability power 60. Heals your HP. Okay. Why would you want to reduce time adaptation effect buffs on the enemy? This is okay. That's good. You definitely want to remove buffs from other people if you can, but it only does that for 10 seconds, and I think most of those buffs tend to last longer than 10 seconds, so it's kind of like a temporary blip on the buff, if I'm understanding that correctly. And then it heals yourself, and since you use a bunch of magical attack, that's bound to actually do a decent amount of healing. Again, this isn't something that breaks through invulnerability and that sort of thing, so that's a bit of a problem. Again, book-type weapon has to be in the main slot, which is not something I feel like you're going to be doing as a mage, so that's a problem. It does use both magical attack and magical defense, which are your stats, so, I mean, you're going to have a decent damage output with the ability power of 160, but everything else about this ability makes it so meh, except for the cooldown, which is, not bad at all. Suicide Black. So this makes me think of, at least the picture, Ancient Spell. And has a very low cooldown, loving the cooldown of 7 seconds and the cost of nothing. Love when it costs nothing. This one targets one enemy, though, with an ability power of 110. Deals magic damage 5 times with a success value of 100 and restores 5% of damage dealt as HP. So, kind of like Siphon. Applies Insanity for 10 seconds with a success value of 50. So, Insanity, causes certain things. It's status, and basically when someone's inflicted with insanity, the following effects take place. You cannot select abilities you want to use. You will randomly use an ability every 5 seconds. There's a chance, roughly 25%, for an ability to be replaced with one of the following. Insanity action attack damages you for 40% of your current HP. You could do an insanity heal, which heals opponent by 5% of their max HP. You could hinder, which lowers your unison gauge by 10. You end up having a net loss of 9. because you did an action. And then the insanity action of boost increases opponent's stats by 80%. So basically you're screwing yourself and your team and benefiting your enemy often with insanity. But it's only for 10 seconds with a success value of 50, so probably not going to really see too much of an issue with that. However, it decreases your Unison gauge by 10 and reduces your HP recovery effect by 50% for 10 seconds. And this excludes cooldown reduction and dual attack. So, few things. I like that it deals damage multiple times and it's guaranteed to hit, but the ability power is very low. I do like that it can help you restore your health and that it can apply insanity to the target. But because the success rate of doing that is so low and it's only for 10 seconds, if it does hit, it's kind of like, whatever. Don't like that it decreases your Unison gauge by 10. That's not good, especially if, you're trying to snipe someone and you hit this accidentally, let's say in a guild battle or Colo situation, and then you wind up screwing yourself and your team because, Unison battles are how you win things in this game. When it comes to PvP, like that's a little problematic. I could see that being an issue, especially if you change your set right before or something and you kind of like forget. Not a fan that it reduces your HP recovery effect, but then again, those don't come up too often, or at least the guild battles I'm in, I don't see a lot, or in quests a lot. So this is better in some ways and so much worse in others. Like it started off so good with that lack of cost and that cooldown, and then I think it kind of got a little more meh as I went along. So far, not seeing a ton I like. Now there's Archmage's Blessing, reduces physical damage taken by 40%. That's good. I mean, mages are weak to lancers. That could be beneficial for sure. Next up, we have Diminishment. Oh, geez. 30-second cooldown. That's awful. And a cost of 20? Ow. This one targets all enemies. It activates Time Extend, which increases the time disadvantageous effects, debuffs, special debuffs, and non-removable buffs or debuffs are applied to the target by 10 seconds for one time only. That is very confusing. Let's read this again. Target all enemies activates Time Extend, which increases the time disadvantageous effects. Debuffs, special debuffs, and non-removable debuffs are applied to the target by 10 seconds for one time only. Okay, so you're just kind of trolling people with this one, and it's only for 10 seconds? Like, that's not worth it. With that cooldown and that cost, like, do something else. Jesus. Okay, and then the last thing in this ring is Mage EX weapon level. I think it's supposed to be level 1, but they're kind of smashed together, so you can't really tell. So this one increases the magical attack of books and relics by 40%. So I see this with a lot of new classes, and I have a few issues with it. First, the whole game now, the starting classes have had their weapon, in the case of a mage, it's a staff, or, all the other classes have 2 weapon types that they have boosts for, or bonuses for. And that's just been how it was. And I feel like adding this in now at the 7th rank, kind of, I don't know, it's not saying true to the like classic nature of the game. It's not saying true to the game is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. And it doesn't feel like the game anymore. It's like, mages have their staffs, archers have their guns and their bows, and now it's like, actually mages can also have books and relics now. No, that's a cleric thing. Stop it. The other thing I have an issue with is I feel like this isn't really advantageous for anyone other than someone who spends a lot of money on the game, like a whale, basically. Because, like, if you're someone who predominantly plays one class like I do, I built my account in a way where I have tons of staffs that are infused and they have good abilities, and I really, like, put everything into my staffs. So I don't really have a lot of anything else. So I feel like that's something that's going to be the case for not just me, but a lot of other players who aren't spending money on the game. So this doesn't really help. Like, if you already built your account and you have all these weapons that have the great abilities and they're infused and all that jazz, like, why would you switch to these other weapons that you don't have infused and probably don't have much of? Like, that doesn't make sense. After pouring all that time into the game, I don't think you're really going to see any sort of benefit to just suddenly switching your weapons over. It just seems silly. So that's the mage ring, or the archmage ring. Let's go on to soldier now. First up, we have Vigilance, which has a low cooldown of 5, that makes me happy, and a low cost of 9, also makes me happy. So this soldier exclusive ability targets one enemy with an ability power of 150. It deals physical damage 2 times. It penetrates any nullifying or invulnerability effects with a success value of 100. It applies Provoke. The target will only be able to select your character when using an ability against enemies for 10 seconds. Reduces the action speed of the target NPC by 20 for 10 seconds. Reduces cost recovery speed by 5 for 10 seconds. Reduces your physical and magic damage taken by 50% for 5 seconds. Okay, this seems good, all around. Low cooldown, low cost. Decent ability power, does damage twice, penetrates nullifying and invulnerability, has this ability where only you can be targeted, but it's only for 10 seconds, so it could wind up murdering you, but maybe not, because soldiers tend to be fairly tanky. Rooks, especially now, are a little more so, but you might not die, you might, especially if there's a mage facing off against you. It reduces the action speed of the target NPC by 20 for 10 seconds. Okay, that's probably not super beneficial. The game is not as hard as it used to be. It's definitely geared toward solo play a lot more than it used to be. Reduces cost recovery speed by 5 for 10 seconds. That's ouch. That's pretty ouch. But it's only 10 seconds, so even that's not that terrible. Actually, that's for the enemy. It's not saying it's a demerit. I'm sorry. So that definitely, that helps you a lot. You don't want them regaining cost so they can do damage. I guess that's how they offset the fact that, this applies Provoke and only you can be targeted. And then reduces your physical and magic damage taken by 50% for 5 seconds. Again, I could think to offset Provoke. So again, not bad. That's pretty solid. Okay. Next up, we have Soldier Weapon Level 2. Increases attack of swords and axes by 20%. That's great. It helps you do some more damage. Next up, we have Brave Introduction. Cooldown of 10, cost of 5. Okay. Pretty average cooldown, low cost. That's good. This soldier exclusive ability targets one enemy and adjacent enemies to a max of 3. It applies Provoke. Target will only be able to select your character when using an ability against enemies for 5 seconds. Okay, that's... I don't know why you'd want to do that. It's only 5 seconds, but it's like a cost and a cooldown to just basically not do anything. I guess if you're helping some sort of lower level player in a quest, maybe an SOS quest or something of that nature, it might help because then they can't be targeted for a while and that might give the cleric some time to help them. But I don't really see a good use for this ability. Just take a damage action or something else, or even mend or something to help your team. I don't see this being particularly useful. Okay, next up, Soldier Guard Level 2 increases defense, so the physical defensive armor by 20%. Solid, that's what you're probably going to be wearing, so you're getting a little tankier. Next up, we have Joquel Hops. Cooldown of 8, cost of 15. That's a little median there. It's usable when an axe-type weapon is equipped in the main slot, targets one enemy, ability power of 150. Deals physical damage 5 times, it penetrates any nullifying or invulnerability effects with a success value of 100, removes buffs from target. That's pretty solid. The cost is maybe a little higher than I might want it to be, but it has decent ability power, low cooldown, doing physical damage that penetrates nullifying and invulnerability, and also removes buffs from the target. So that's pretty good, because obviously if people are buffed, they're probably going to do more damage to you and your team, and you don't want that. Next up, we have Blooming Blackout. Cooldown of 7, cost of 18, that's a little high, not a fan of that. It's usable when a sword-type weapon is equipped in the main slot, targets one enemy, ability power 120, deals physical damage 4 times using both physical and attack and defense, physical attack and defense. With a success value of 100, fills the Unison gauge of all allies, excluding yourself, by 5. Applies Frozen for 10 seconds with a success value of 50. So Frozen applies the following effects. Basically, there's a roughly 25% chance that, whoever it's inflicted on will be paralyzed, and your attack and magic damage are decreased by 50%. So that's pretty rough. This really just benefits you. It's like a fancy attack version of Cheer. I don't know how else to put it. Fancy attack version of Cheer. That also is trolly for the person that you're, inflicting this on. So that's good. Little low on the ability power, little high on the cost. Not a big fan of that, but this isn't bad. Next up, Undine's Affection. Increases water elemental attack by 5 for the soldier class. All right. Not anything exciting, but okay. Turbulent Butterfly. All right. Cooldown of 5 seconds. That's pretty great. Cost of 12. It's fairly low, so that's good. Usable when a gun-type weapon is equipped in the main slot, targets one enemy, deals physical damage that ignores physical defense 3 times with an ability power of 140, and success value of 70. Deals magic damage that ignores magical defense 3 times with an ability power of 140 and success value of 70. Applies grief, 5% chance to increase damage by 50% for 10 seconds. So, excuse me. This one is dumb. You're probably not going to have a gun. You're probably not going to equip it in the main slot. You're probably not going to have balanced stats to actually make this ability do a decent amount of damage as a soldier. Because unless you basically have like a traditional archer build, like I don't see this doing enough damage to make it worth equipping. So, forget this one. Next up, this one reminds me of Lament of Falling Flowers as far as the little image is concerned. Blossom Blizzard. Weird name. Cooldown of 4 seconds, cost of 6. So both very low. That's a great start. Targets one enemy with an ability power of 180. Great so far. Deals physical damage 3 times using both attack and magical attack with success value of 100. That might cause a problem because, again, your stats aren't likely to be very balanced when you have a soldier as your class. Applies Vital Strike, 5% chance to increase damage by 50% to self for 5 seconds. So that part isn't bad, but only for 5 seconds, so you might get like a hit out, but not if your cost is low, or if you have everything cooling down. You might be able to hit this again, but you know, it's a little iffy if you're not careful. And again, the fact that this is really made for someone with balanced stats might cause it to not do as much damage, even though the ability power is high. So a little iffy. You really have to consider basically adjusting how you play as soldier in order to make this more viable, which is a little strange. Next up, we have Master Swordsman's Blessing, reduces magic damage taken by 40%. This is great because we all know that mages eat soldiers for breakfast, so that's bad. This might help that. Next up, we have Fierce Encouragement. Ooh, cooldown of 40 seconds with a cost of 15. Ouch, girl. This one is a soldier-exclusive ability that targets all allies. It applies a Reliance state that nullifies Unison Gauge reduction one time, increases the max HP of all allies by 35% for 15 seconds. So that's actually pretty good despite the really crap cooldown. This is a great way to block something like negative pressure from affecting your team in a, let's say, Coliseum or guild battle setting, so PvP predominantly. And it also increases max HP, so this is just like a better version of an earlier ability, who unfortunately I'm blanking on the name of. I'm sorry, guys. Last one is Soldier X Weapon Level 1. Increases the attack, so physical and magical attack, of bows and guns by 40%. Again, like, you're probably not going to be using these because you've been soldiering along and using other weapons that are probably infused and better. So this is kind of a throwaway, not that beneficial, although that boost is a pretty great boost if you happen to have them around. All right, Lancer is next. So now we have the Master Lancer. First ability is Delta Sting. Low cost of 9 and low cooldown of 4 seconds. That's pretty good so far. This Lancer exclusive ability targets one enemy with an ability power boosted by 50. The target is already in break. Ability power is normally 100. Okay, that's good. Deals physical damage 3 times with a success value of 100. Increases the target's break by 80. So this is something that can compound on itself and actually get pretty powerful. Low cooldown and low cost is beneficial, and because you're probably going to be breaking people not only with the ladder effect of this ability, but because you're a Lancer, this could actually be pretty solid, especially if you time things right. Lancer Weapon Level 2 increases the attack of lances in size by 20%. Pretty good. Dealing more damage, your DPS class. That's what Lancers are known for. So, awesome little boost for you. Next up is Unshakable Tactics. Oh my gosh, cooldown of 60 seconds and a cost of 20? Ooh, that's awful. This Lancer exclusive ability applies Field Intercept, nullifies advantageous field effects applied to the enemy field for 40 seconds. So that could be really helpful, especially because it's just like a blanket advantageous field effect thing. But that cooldown and that cost and like, you know, those kinds of things are really probably only going to come after monsters are applied, for the most part. I mean, like, there are other ways to boost, but that's the big one. And let's say something like Fanatic Soul. but I don't know if that's really like worth it, like long term for the amount of times you're likely to use this during, you know, an event, you know, a PvP or raid or anything. Oh, that, I mean, yeah, I'm a little iffy about that. I'm not saying it's a bad ability. I just don't think you're going to be using it often enough to make it worth it. And that cost and that cooldown is just like painful. Next up, we have Lancer Guard level 2. Increases the physical defense of helmets by 20%. Okay, making you a little tankier, but, you know, we're dealing damage as a Lancer, so not the most helpful. But again, not bad. Dragon Thrash, cooldown of 7 seconds, cost of 14. So pretty average. I mean, lower on the cooldown, kind of more average on the cost. It's usable when a scythe-type weapon is equipped in the main slot. Targets one enemy with an ability power of 150, deals physical damage 4 times with a success value of 100, applies Scorching for 10 seconds with a success value of 50, and increases your critical hit chance by 20% for 10 seconds. So Scorching, when someone's inflicted with this, the following effects take place. Every time you use an ability, you take damage based on 5% of your current HP per stack. And this has about a 75% chance of taking effect. And it lowers your main slot gear proc chance by about 30%. So, the fact that this doesn't penetrate invulnerability and nullifying and all that jazz might reduce the ability power, you know, basically your potential to do damage is what I'm saying. So that's not great. It does do damage 4 times with a success value of 100, so that's good. The Scorching can really troll people, make it harder for them to survive. I don't know what most people put in their main gear slot, but I mean, I do nulls and a lot of people use the blessing gear. So, I mean, affecting that might be pretty helpful depending on what people have. And it increases your critical hit chance by 20% for 10 seconds. So that's not a long time, but I mean, it's always great to do critical damage because you really just want to end people quickly in this game. Or monsters, you know, whatever you're doing, get through quests faster, get through harder things so you can get your rewards, whatever the case may be. So that's not bad. So that's Dragon Thrash. Very cute little wing. I like that. Next up is Lanceflash. Cooldown of 10 seconds, cost of 17. So that's a little ouch as far as cost is concerned. This is usable when a lance-type weapon is equipped in the main slot. It reduces your physical and magic damage taken by 90% for 3 seconds after this ability is used. Okay, that is literally probably not going to help because it's only 3 seconds. So, I mean, it's great, but 3 seconds probably, like I said, isn't going to get you anywhere. It targets one enemy with an ability power of 180. That's pretty good. Deals physical damage 5 times after the damage reduction effect ends. Interesting. It's like a little bit of a delayed attack. Reduces ability cooldown times, except for certain abilities, by 25% for 15 seconds. So that's pretty helpful. You know, having lower cooldowns will help you do more damage because you can have a faster turnaround. But again, this isn't doing any sort of penetrating for invulnerability and, you know, those sorts of things. So the ability power might not really be as great as you think it will, or the damage output might not be as great as you think it will. And that cost is a little high, so that's a little problematic for me. But this isn't terrible. It's, again, not great. Then we have Ignis Raj's Affection. Increases fire elemental attack by 5 for the Lancer class. Sorry, I just kicked the table, guys, because I'm silly. Nothing special here. Next up, we have Grand Impact, which has a cooldown of 10 and a cost of 15. So pretty average all around. Lower side for cooldown. It's usable when an axe-type weapon is equipped in the main slot. Targets one enemy. Removes damage reflection and damage reduction. Interesting, but then that kind of has to be up front, I think. You know, like presented on the character or that you're trying to affect. Basically, like the mirror things have to be clear. Indicated on the character, I'm pretty sure. If I'm understanding this correctly, it has an ability power of 170, deals physical damage 5 times with success value of 100, applies quiver. Target will only be able to select themselves when using an ability that supports allies for 10 seconds. Okay, so ability power is decent because you're removing reflection and damage reduction. You might actually get a decent amount of that to go through. It does 5 times. Physical damage with success value of 100, so you're always hitting, so that's pretty great. The quiver I don't think is really going to help too much because most most healers are going to just select themselves, but then probably have some sort of area heal. So they'll probably be able to hit the teammates that need to be hit, but not necessarily. And I don't feel like this is really going to be too applicable when it comes to PvE. So that part's kind of mad, but this really isn't bad, but because you have to use an axe and that's not something you were typically using as a Lancer previously, probably won't be something that you're going to equip so you can actually use this ability. Next up, we have Raging Break. Little cooldown of 6 seconds, high cost of 18. Not a fan of that cost. It's a Lancer exclusive ability which targets one enemy with an ability power of 100, so that's a little low. Deals physical damage 3 times. It penetrates damage reduction and damage reflection effects with a success value of 70, so that's why, but you have a chance to fail, which I'm not fond of. Increases ability cooldown time to 25% for 15 seconds. So not terrible, not great because it's penetrating, but again, the attack power is pretty low. The cost is kind of high. I feel like there are better options than this one, especially because there's no combo or anything to make it better. Now we have Master Lancer's Blessing. 20% chance to nullify damage when magic damage is taken. That's pretty great. You know, you want to nullify damage whenever you can because then you're not getting hurt and dying and you can live to do damage another day. You know, wake up and choose silence. Next is Master Lancer's Cry. It said that very strangely, Master Lancer's Cry. That's a little better. Ooh, high cooldown, 20 seconds, high cost of 25. This Lancer exclusive ability targets one enemy and adjacent enemies with a max of 3 enemies. Reduces Unison Gauge by 8. Decreases Unison Gauge gains by 2 for 5 seconds. So this is kind of like a modified negative pressure. So instead of reducing the target's Unison Gauge by 10, it'll only do 8, but it also decreases their gains for 5 seconds, which I don't feel like is going to be too beneficial because it's such a short amount of time. And, you know, how many abilities are they going to use in that 5 seconds, like between the animation and the cost and everything else? Like, I don't see this being particularly beneficial. Might as well just use what you've been using. Although the lower cost of this ability, and I believe also lower cooldown over the base negative pressure, if I'm not mistaken, might make it a little more usable, like long term, because you can turn them out a little faster. Last thing in the string is Lancer X Weapon level 1. Increases the attack of swords and axes by 40%. Again, this isn't something I feel like you're going to be using because you probably don't have like infused good weapons. But because they have the same stats typically, like higher physical attack than magical, you're not really adjusting your gameplay style as much with this Lancer transition as you would be with some of the other classes I discussed. And by that I mean mainly the soldier, because soldiers aren't typically balanced classes the way that archers are. So this isn't terrible, but again, probably not something you're going to be using. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. What do you think of some of the abilities you've used, if you've used them? Do you have any questions about unlocking the classes? You know, let me know those sorts of things. I always like to know that kind of stuff. Always like to have discussion down in my comment section. And if you like what you saw here today, please smash that like button until it's blue. Subscribe, ring that bell so you know what's up, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye, guys.